Hey, good morning. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. Jane and Greg are off today, stretching out the long weekend, which they so earned so well over this long stretch leading up to the election and the sad aftermath of the election. So I hope they're enjoying themselves. I hope they are recharging their batteries. I'm Matt Rothschild. I'm the former editor and publisher at the Progressive Magazine and formerly the executive director at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign. It's nice to be with you today. If you want to join our conversation all across the Civic Media Radio Network, the number to call is 855-752-4842. That's 855-75-CIVIC. You know, I thought I'd start the day with a little poem. I love poetry, and I was reading this book called Garden Time by W.S. Merwin. And the title of the poem is appropriately December Morning. It's short, so you won't suffer too much. Here we go. How did I come to this late happiness as I wake into my remaining days, another morning in my life with Paula, his wife, taking me by surprise like the first one? I know it's rash to speak about happiness with the fates so near that I can hear them, but this morning, even the old regrets seem to have lost their rancor, and I forget that I'm almost blind, and I see the piles of books I was going to read next. There they wait, like statues of sitting dogs, faithful to someone they used to know. But happiness has a shape made of air. It was never owned by anyone, and it comes when it will, in its own time. Love that poem. Maybe it's just an old man poem, and that's why it resonates with me, but it is a December morning, a cold and a little blustery, snowflakey Monday morning here in Wisconsin. And I wanted to give a little advice before we get into politics, because I'm a bird watcher too, as well as a poetry lover and a political guy. The advice is the birds are real hungry right now. It's hard for them to find food. When it gets below freezing, they need a lot of fat. So please put some suet out. If you got, suet in a suet cage, a cake of suet, that's great. But even on top of that, something better, chop up some of that suet cake or butcher suet and put some on the ground, because a lot of birds don't want to come to the hanging suet. They prefer to eat on the ground. And if there's a bully bird like a blue jay or a big woodpecker on the suet, they can't get to the suet anyway. So throw a bunch of it on the ground, and you'll be amazed at the birds that come and how welcome they'll be, and they'll bring you happiness, as the poet said. We need to find happiness. So what I wanted to do right now is offer you a flavor of Jane's take herself on right-wing radio. I've got a podcast on Civic Media called Wisconsin Forward Podcast. And in an upcoming one, we're going to talk about the dominance of right-wing radio in Wisconsin. And I interviewed Jane for that. So, Calvin, if you don't mind, let's just play that and let our listeners hear from Jane, even though she's not here in the studio with us today. Let me ask you, you've been in radio a long time.
I have.
And right-wing radio, talk radio here in the Milwaukee area played a big role in Wisconsin's politics. Do you want to talk about that?
Right-wing talk radio became purely the purview of the right because, at least in my estimation, the left did not see that as a threat. And there are also other things you have to remember that what happened to the radio industry over the course of the decades. So they got rid of the fairness doctrine in the mid-'80s. In the mid-'90s, they got rid of the rule that limited ownership for any one company of the number of media properties they could own in any one community. So when they allowed these companies to start buying up not only the newspaper, but the television station, and I'm going to buy 2 radio stations, and the whole logic behind that was this was going to make media and radio so much better, Matt, because you'd have all of these little stations that could now do reggae, and they wouldn't have to play top 40 music or rock and roll music or there's just going to be so much more freedom. That is not what happened, even remotely. The only people this deregulation did good things for were the people who were buying up radio stations and then consolidating everything and getting rid of half of the staff and running 3 stations now with a staff of 1. So that whole premise that this was going to bring more opinions and more views did not happen. And like I said, I think the left was lazy about appreciating the impact that this was going to have, especially when Rush Limbaugh, who is probably the the standard bearer for this. I think when he started, he sold himself more as an entertainer as opposed to a serious political commentator. That changed. As he got more powerful, he used that as a much bigger bludgeon. And in my estimation, led the way to the coarse discourse that we have now among people who are elected officials. Rush Limbaugh is the one who I believe it was called Sandra Fluke a slut because she wanted to have birth control. So this kind of paved the way for that kind of rhetoric and that kind of hateful framing of the other. And again, us othering each other only helps them.
And while you were in radio at the time, it must have been kind of horrifying for you to hear what was coming out.
Well, I was in music radio, but the equivalent for music radio were shock jocks, and on rock stations, and they would say the most vile, revolting, sexual jokes, and that was big in the 80s. And then Howard Stern, of course, became the standard bearer for that. I have never listened to Howard Stern. I've been told many times, oh, he's changed and it's much better. And okay, that's fine. That was never my cup of tea. That was never my kind of humor.
I heard him when he was getting going in 1980, 1981, 1982 when I was living in D.C. And it was just unbelievable the stuff he was able to say on the radio. And then politically here in Wisconsin, right-wing talk radio, Charlie Sykes et al., what role did they play?
It was massive. It really was massive. And I have to give credit where credit is due because some of those hosts did a remarkable job of taking facts, turning them completely around and upside down, and ending up blaming the Democrat and not the Republican. It was a really impressive feat to watch some of these guys turn everything upside down and inside out so that their guy came off looking good and the other person was the demon. It was really something to witness. I'm not quite sure I would ever be that mentally flexible, so I guess I have to give credit where credit is due. But there were lots of falsehoods and lies and smears that then became just accepted as truth, especially because I listen to this guy and I trust him.
And the repetition, the force of repetition.
Over and over, the pounding of the messages. Keep it short, keep it simple, repeat it over and over. Joseph Goebbels was the one who said that about propaganda, and that's what we're still living with today.
Mm-hmm. And is it liberating for you to be on Civic Media and be able to speak your mind in a way that maybe you couldn't before?
I cannot tell you how grateful I am for this opportunity. Seriously. Like you said, I've been in this business for 4 decades. Most of it was in music radio, but even then, I was never overtly political. I certainly had a lot of opinions, which was going to be not a shock to anyone who's ever worked with me for any length of time. But that wasn't my role at that time. So I do find it immensely freeing to be able to say what I think and hopefully to get people to think and laugh and learn at the same time. I don't believe in lecturing people to get them to my side. I don't think that's effective. I want us to like each other, and I want us to learn things together, and then I want us to appreciate things together. And once we have a little bit of that back and forth going, then we can talk about harder things and hopefully come to some place in the middle, because I don't believe everyone is always right or always wrong.
What role did right-wing radio, Charlie Sykes and all those guys play politically here in Wisconsin?
You know, every time I see Charlie Sykes today,
Here's Earl.
you know, I remember when Charlie Sykes was first leaving, and I called in the last day he was there. He says, "Oh, it's Earl." You know, I said, "Well, you know, Charlie, I remember you and Mark Billing, Northridge. If you know anything about Milwaukee, was a viable place, and it was an anchor. and there were businesses everywhere. It was a very viable middle-class community, and Northridge was the anchor. And a guy named Jesse Anderson, a white guy, killed his wife, and he blamed it on black guys. I don't know if you remember the story. And he got on the airway, him and Mark Billing, and denigrated Northridge and told people it's unsafe, don't go there. Northridge died. The business community in a vibrant city like Northridge, strong middle class, Brown Deer neighborhood, died. And I remember saying to Charlie Sykes on the day that he was getting ready to leave, you know, you helped destroy a vibrant community, a vibrant neighborhood. I remember telling Mark Billing the exact same thing. They tried to weasel out of it, but they had that kind of influence and that kind of power, and they used, racial overtones to gain their popularity. Well, it's easy to do that when, again, the racial makeup is 95% to 5%. And so when there aren't enough black people to go around in the state of Wisconsin for people to get to know one, right? I mean, so they go by what they hear. And there are people, unfortunately, in this society who make money off of those kinds of things.
So those were two excerpts from an upcoming podcast that I'm doing for Civic Media. It's called the Wisconsin Forward Podcast. That podcast will be on the role of right-wing media here in Wisconsin. And it was great to hear both from Earl Ingram and from Jane about that. And, Jane made the point about deregulation. Reagan and Bill Clinton brought us deregulation. And that deregulation has led to the rise of right-wing radio, and Jane was right. They took advantage of it, and we didn't. We got to change that. We'll be right back after a short break to talk about that and also talk about maybe the pardon the president just gave his son. We'll be right back on Matenaer On Air. Good morning, Matt Rothschild, subbing in here for Jane on Matenaer On Air. Jane and Greg are off today. They'll be back tomorrow. They have wisely decided to take this long Thanksgiving weekend and extend it by another day, and they certainly earned it. I'm Matt Rothschild. We heard Jane there talking about the role of right-wing radio, and I want to know what you, and Earl for that matter, let me know what you think about that. 855-752-4842. That's 855-75-CIVIC. You can also call and weigh in on the pardon that Joe Biden just gave his son. We have a lot of people on the text line that I wanted to read out their views. Tom was saying, Jane was correct about the role of right-wing radio, and the Democrats didn't take it seriously enough. I guess they didn't think fireside chats were the way to go, he says. But even, Biden wasn't even doing fireside chats. One of the problem with Biden, even though I thought he was a more progressive president than I thought he would be at the start, was he didn't really communicate with the American people in any regular way like FDR did with his famous fireside chats. He didn't hold press conferences. And so even though he was doing some good things, the communication, the messaging fell behind. And then I see we've had a lot of messages from Chad, who was saying this pardon, Joe Biden's pardon of his son, Hunter, was another act of hypocrisy by the Democrats, another act of favoritism by the elite, taking care of their own families. Let me know what you think about that at 855-752-4842. Here's my view. As a dad, I'd have done it in a heartbeat. I'd have pardoned my son quicker than you can, say goodbye, because one of the powers the president had is to pardon anybody. And if you're not going to use that power to help your own family, especially someone who's been suffering and dealt with a lot of adversities, trying to get his act together, what good is it? The only thing I'd have done a couple things I would have done differently. First of all, I wouldn't have lied ahead of time that I was going to pardon him. All Biden had to say was, I'll take into consideration all requests for pardons between Thanksgiving and Christmas, the typical time when presidents decide whether they should pardon or not. And the other thing in his statement, I wouldn't have gotten into, well, this was wrongful prosecution on the Justice Department's part, because who did that sound like? That sounded like Trump. All he had to say is, look, I'm a dad. My son's been in trouble. He's getting his life together. I want to help him out. Here's a pardon. And boom. I don't think many people could have found a lot of fault with that, maybe Chad, but, I do think, I don't know a lot of dads who wouldn't have done it. Chad said, my son doesn't need to be, or is quoting, my son doesn't need to be held accountable. Not sure what he's talking about there exactly. I think maybe he's saying some dads would say, you made the mistake, you deal with the consequences, boom, and take the hard line on that. But that's not what I think most dads would do if they had this power. I do think it does feed into what Chad was talking about, though, which is this idea that, those who have the power, get away with things that the rest of us don't. And also, the lying about it ahead of time is really troublesome because it fuels the impression, and it's a wrong impression, that all politicians are the same, all politicians lie, all politicians are out for themselves. Can't believe any politicians. The whole thing is corrupt. Every single politician is the same. And it's just not true. I mean, I know Mark Pocan, my representative in the House of Representatives, isn't like that. I knew Russ Feingold. He wasn't like that. I know Tammy Baldwin. She's not like that. So by fueling this idea that all politicians are the same, it gives, first of all, it's a falsehood. Secondly, it gives an out to someone who plays the outsider like Trump does, and Trump says, oh, I'm not a politician. I'm not like everybody else in Washington. That helped him the first time. Actually, I think it helped him the second time. But who's Trump to talk, though? I mean, he's giving Jared Kushner's, he pardoned Jared Kushner's dad, and now he gives him ambassador to France. I mean, it's not like Joe Biden said Hunter should be ambassador to Ireland. So, look, we got to look at this in a humane way. I think Joe Biden did what most humane dads would do. But there was no reason for him to lie about it in the first place. This is part of the Joe Biden clumsiness that's so adversely affected Kamala Harris's chances. And I think when we look back, that's going to be the real story. That and the role of inflation and some of the nasty ads that Trump played. You know, Biden not getting out of the race the first time, Biden not being able to communicate because the staff kept him in a closet under wraps because they were worried he was going to stumble if they let him out of the closet, which he probably would have. And then, you know, Biden saying a week before the election that all Trump supporters are trash or garbage. That was awful. That was the Hillary Clinton basket of deplorables mistake. We're going to keep making the same mistake and castigating whole millions upon millions of people, name calling them, which only, you know, pushes them further and further into the Trump cult. I mean, that's not how we should do politics. Here in Wisconsin, we don't do a lot of name calling here, not on Civic Media. It's not what we try to do. We try to have civic dialogue. We take phone calls from people who disagree with us. We try to handle those with grace. If you want to call in, if you're a Trump supporter, 855-752-4842. I'll take your call, hear what you have to say, as long as you keep it civil. We believe in civil dialogue here at Civic Media because one thing we need to do here in Wisconsin is talk to people who didn't vote the way we wanted them to vote for. We have to recognize that, you know, more than half the people who voted for Donald Trump, not only in Wisconsin, but around the country. So how do we have that conversation? And it's not by labeling people as bad or terrible or trash like Biden did. We've got to find another way to talk to people. And part of it starts with listening. We need to listen first, then respond, engage principally with people, try to establish relationship with people, not people flying Nazi flags or Confederate flags, don't get me wrong. But the vast majority of the people who voted for Trump are not flying those Confederate flags, do not, you know, wear swastikas on their biceps. That's not what happened. Yes, there are fascists and racists in this country, and we have to defeat them. But not everyone, not most, who voted for Trump are in that camp. So we need to engage in conversations and join organizations that are doing good work and support those organizations on Giving Tuesday tomorrow. So I hope you'll call 855-752-4842. We're going to continue this conversation on Matenaer On Air with an old friend of mine, an old progressive, an old Democrat, Billy Feitlinger. He'll be joining me right after the break, so please stay tuned.
So let me ask you a question. Next year, when you turn another year, is your lovely wife going to give you more passes?
Depends what my score sheet says. Gotta look at my blotter.
Am I going here?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you'll get the ears on
This is
it.
kind of cool. I never knew this was. How long has this been here?
So this, it's really a couple years old, this experiment. And it's really great. They've been,
Put these on.
yeah, there's stayed like 20
I've got
stations.
hearing aids, and is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are 20 stations around the state. And it's just an amazing kind of experiment
There we go.
to try to counter right-wing radio and foster civic
That's
dialogue
fantastic.
and do it in a way that isn't just the alternative of right-wing radio, where we call everyone on the other side idiots, but
Yeah. Cool. Very cool. And I did get your email. I'd be more than happy to respond to Ben.
about Ben, that's kind of fun
Yeah,
too.
yeah. I had actually already knew about this because the father is of the guy who actually did the production for Ben. I'm friends with Jim Youngerman. Does that ring a
Yeah,
bell?
it rings a bell.
Yeah.
But every
His
bell,
son.
every bell is faint right now.
Right. His son Ben did a wonderful job for Ben Whitler.
So the first segment runs from 10:30 forward, and there's the big clock, to 10:49, and then we'll take a 2-minute break and run to 10:58. Does that sound good? Can you be with me?
Whatever.
Makes it easier for me.
Yep. Absolutely. Very cool. And how long have you been doing this for?
So I'm a substitute teacher. So whenever a host is gone, I offer my service.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I said, you need a live radio, so you can't
Yeah.
run old stuff. So, yeah, if they need
Very
me.
cool. And it's also good for you in terms of enjoying stuff like this.
Yeah, it keeps me out of the house.
Keeps you out of the house.
Yeah.
And then you can just go right from here.
It's good today, yeah. It's the big one today, $55.
How's Jean doing?
Jean's good. She doesn't like the poker still, but
Hey, listen, my wife is upset that I'm not playing poker.
really?
Yeah. Yeah, because get her out, get me out of the
Well, you
house.
should do those Tuesday, Thursday night.
I might at some point.
Give it a
I might
try.
at some point. So you don't go to the one in Middleton?
No.
Is that because
My
it's just?
my oldest son goes, Sam.
Yes. Okay. Gotcha. I think I've met him before.
Yeah, he's the loose. I have two sons. One's loose and one's tight. Sam's loose. He still goes there.
So Stuck is not doing well.
I wonder. He was in the hospital. But he's still.
Yeah, he's out. I'm going to bring him food on Friday.
Say
You know,
hi
he's-
for me, will you? I'm going to try to remember to send him a note.
Yeah, you definitely should do that. He's
And-
not doing last.
What is the condition?
It's a lot. I think there's mental health issues. I think there is.
We should
orth-
probably know.
Oh yeah, yes.
Because
Yeah.
some of this may be going out.
Okay, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I don't want to break his privacy. So
Yeah. Absolutely.
I
Thanks
gotta
for telling me that. Yeah.
I got to send him a note.
Yeah, send him a note. Yeah. So I'm going to see him on Friday.
And we'll be on in a minute here.
Yeah, no problem. I just got a few notes here just in case I started thinking about this. Ben Wickler. Yes.
Do you want to start with Ben or do you want to start with the election?
Let's start with the election.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as you'll hear, Ben Wickler is the real deal, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
Without saying that every person, including you or me, are not perfect human beings, obviously.
No, who's perfect? I gave up on perfect a long time.
I know. Well, there are people that actually still believe that shit.
Well, I know they're perfectionists.
Yeah, and I have a problem with those, whether they're liberal, progressive, left-wingers,
Right.
conservatives. Oh, my God. What a
It-
world we live in.
It is annoying.
I wish there was some way that I could actually see from wherever I'm going to be at some point, are we still okay at some point in life, which I'm not going to be here for.
All right, we're going to be on. Let's be quiet just for 30 seconds here.
It's getting better all the time. I used to get mad about school.
Good morning. I hope it's getting better. Matt Rothschild here, subbing in for Jane Matenaer on her terrific show, Matenaer On Air, that she does with Greg Bach. They're off today. They'll be back tomorrow. The number to call here is 855-752-4842. That's 855-75-CIVIC. You can also text, as we've been getting texts from Tom and Chad this morning. Happy to take your texts, and I'll hope to get an opportunity to read them on the air. But I'm joined right now by an old friend of mine. His name is Billy Feitlinger. Billy worked for Russ Feingold and for Dane County execs Rick Phelps and Kathleen Falk. He was elected to Madison's Common Council 3 times in the 80s and served as president of the council in 83. And from 2005 to 2016, he was executive director of the Wisconsin Alliance for Retired Americans. But Billy Feitlinger can't spell retire. He was out there organizing for Kamala Harris this fall. Billy, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Matt, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure's all mine. Why don't you give me your reaction when Kamala Harris lost?
Well, my personal reaction was very disheartened and disappointed and angry. But weeks before the election, all I can remember is with my closest friends, I had said that, if you think about it, Donald Trump in 2020 lost by 3 states about 45,000 votes. And that's when he basically totally mismanaged the worst pandemic in a long, long, long history of America and our world. he only lost by 45,000 votes. So I was privately not as optimistic, even though I worked my buns off and whatever I could as an old man. But I had my own reality check too.
But it was so weird. I mean, he not only mismanaged the pandemic that cost, more than 1 million people's lives here in the United States, but he was a traitor. I mean, he's going to go down in the history books as a traitor. He was the guy who tried to overturn a democratically elected president of the United States, Joe Biden. And yet here we have a majority of the voting public choosing him again. It's just so hard to wrap my mind around that. How do you wrap your mind around it?
Well, first place is, since November 5th, the data doesn't show that he won a majority. Now, granted, he won. He won a fair and open election. Different than 2020, as you suggested in your comments. So as I see it, is that we have a lot of work ahead of us, but don't want to throw everything out that we have accomplished in the past. And looking at the future, what are the issues? Well, the first place you start with is how do we rebuild the coalition? We have to have a 50-state solution. We shouldn't be putting aside certain states. There's no doubt about it. But before we get to that grandiose and very difficult task, we must at least rebuild the coalition, which is hard enough to do.
And how do you do that?
Well, first place, I say, first, I don't have all the answers. Let me be real clear about that.
Come on, I brought you on for all the answers.
Yeah, though I don't have all the answers, and I'm not one of the insiders to have all the data. But clearly, there are certain basic things. Do we show to people, the working class in our country, that we really, truly do care? My belief, and what bothers me the most, is if you look at the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party, my belief still is that the Democratic Party is the party of the working class. The problem is that's not what the working class is telling us today in 50 states in our country.
We're not making the sale somehow.
We're absolutely not making the sales, even though I think the Biden administration did a number of very, very, very positive things for the working class. But as you just said, we're not selling it. That's one thing. And the two, we're clearly not showing to people that we truly do care about people who are working every day or working 2 jobs a day or working 3 jobs over a week. And we have to come and do a better job of that. We need to communicate. We need to have programs. We need to really work hard at making sure the day-to-day activities are being met by specific legislation, whether it be at the federal, state, or local levels.
I think part of the problem was that Biden was and his staff were crowing about the macroeconomic statistics. We're better than any of the European countries. We got out of the COVID period without a recession. We're having a soft landing, and then citing macroeconomic statistics that are meaningless to people when their rent has gone up a lot,
Right.
and when gas early on was high, though it's gone down now. But car insurance is super high. Groceries are high, and so that didn't really compute for people.
And, to be quite frank, I probably bought into that as well. I'm talking about myself now. The reality is until June 26th of this year, I really thought that not only Joe Biden, he is go down as a good president. He made many mistakes. One of the mistakes he clearly made was he shouldn't have been running again until June 27th when
Right.
he had that terrible debate. But I also bought into that. I really think he could have still won. And that was a reality that just wasn't true.
You
But
don't
as-
buy into that still.
Oh, absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely. No, I'm saying
Right, at the time.
At the time, I want to be
Right.
real frank,
Right.
that I thought on June 26th, he could still make a go of it and still win this election. I was wrong.
Well, you didn't have the information. None of us had the information about how out of it he was. I mean, that debate was just self-immolation.
And so part of it truly is, when you talk about selling, is the messenger. And the messenger has to be somebody, man or woman, who can really lay out in a very concise way what they are willing to do for working families in our country. And I think if we had a better messenger during that time, maybe things might have been a little different. But I'm still not convinced, based on what I just said to you.
Right.
I think we have a bigger issue, which is why is it that Donald Trump received 2 million more votes in 2024 than 2020? Why is it that 7 million more Americans decided not to vote in 2024 than in 2020? And what population, what voters should we, the Democratic Party or the progressive community, be targeting to try to change their minds versus there is a group of people in our country, I'm not sure at this point, as really an optimistic kind of guy, want to spend a lot of time right now working towards trying to change their minds because we're not on the same, facts don't matter to some people.
I mean, it is hard. It's hard in so many ways. And I've had the maybe short-sighted view or egotistical view that if I'm nice to people who I know vote for Trump, if I befriend them and talk to them reasonably about issues and listen to them, that eventually I'm going to bring them around. I don't think I've brought them around yet. I can't. Maybe there are a few people. It's just hard to know. And so the question is then, who do you talk to? Who do you spend your energies on? And then there's the question of whether the Liz Cheney strategy was the right strategy for Democrats, whether having this big coalition from Liz Cheney to Bernie Sanders and AOC was working, or whether Liz Cheney turned people off. Certainly Dick Cheney turned people off.
Right.
And so...
so again, on that particular one, I want to put it on the right out there, is that I thought part of the strategy of bringing in people like Liz Cheney was a good thing.
I bought into it too, but I'm not sure the facts at the end of the day bear us out.
Right, I understand that. I'm just want to be clear about who I am. And the bottom line is, as a former organizer, you got to start, and what I was saying before was you have to start with the base. And that means to me, people who we share common ground with, but decided for whatever reasons, either not to vote or to, some of them, vote for Trump. Particularly, as an example, union members who clearly have an invested interest in collective bargaining and things of that sort. So I think I would start with that population of voters before we go to the 50-state strategy of trying to, because I've always believed, as I was growing up, that having different views, political views, is okay. But we got to start with the same facts. And that is really what I'm really worried about, that we can't come together, whether we agree on the politics or the policies, on the same facts.
Well, that raises a whole separate issue because, there are two separate media universes that people are living in right now. And Jane Matenaer was talking about that in that little interview I did with her in the last half hour. And so then it's hard, you're in different worlds, and it's actually hard to communicate because you say X and they say Y, or you say X and they say negative X. I mean, it's bizarro land.
And what's really troublesome to me is when I hear people say that Donald Trump was a successful businessman. That is furthest from the truth. If you look at the facts, he was not a successful businessman. 6 bankruptcies, got over $400 million from his father on years ago money. But the reality was, when he came into office in 2016, he came into office on the Obama's last 3 years. So he did fine. He did fine in terms of what it mattered to looking at how much jobs were created, the economic growth. But my question, and one of the frustrating things is, he never changed the income inequalities. He never made any changes like that. So where do we go with the working class and people losing jobs, which if you look at this administration, the Biden administration, increased the number of jobs by almost 16 million. Now, granted, that had some of the jobs that were lost during the pandemic. Donald Trump, at the end of his term, had the worst economic job creation since Herbert Hoover. So when we talk about what we need to do, what's puzzling to me is I want to meet every day, if I was still young and was a politician or a non-politician, an organizer, meet with people to figure out what exactly do you want and what do you need.
I think part of it, though, is Trump is a snake oil salesman, and he,
Good one.
a good one, a master. And he talked about, he talked to some working class folks right away. We're not going to tax your tips. And for people who are working in restaurants or doing other jobs where they get tips, that was something he was addressing that they could feel. And then he also attacked the trade deals, Bill Clinton's NAFTA. And he was right to attack that. J.D. Vance was right to attack that. So they had similar critiques of the trade deals that Bernie had. And
Right.
so this was a way that Trump was, to use an old Bill Clinton term, was triangulating. He was going after the natural base of the Democratic Party, and it seemed to have worked. It worked on November 5th, it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But again, a reminder, he won the election fair and square, which is different than when he and his allies were talking about in 2020. But the landslide didn't exist. Now, as a former politician, I understand you want to exaggerate. And as you just said a few minutes ago, he's a master marketer, a master. Well, when you lie and you exaggerate, and in this case, when you have only won by 1.5% or less in the margin of the national results between Harris and Trump, that's no landslide. In fact, it's the third worst in terms of since the 1900s in terms of victories from a presidential campaign. Now, he won, and he won decisively, but not a mandate.
No, but they always claim a mandate. I remember when, Bush Cheney won, they, by the grace of the Supreme Court or by the notorious actions of the U.S. Supreme Court. And then right after that decision, some pundits were saying, oh, there should be a coalition government, or Cheney and Bush should, work through the middle. And no, they said, we got a mandate and we're going to go far right. And that's what they did.
As we reflect,
Yeah, go ahead.
as we reflect, we want to make sure we have the correct data as we try to make changes to do a better job the next time.
And we'll come back with Billy Feitlinger. I'm Matt Rothschild. You're listening to Matenaer On Air on the Civic Media Radio Network. We're going to pick up the conversation in just a minute.
Yes, I admit it's getting better. It's getting better. Soon you'll be mine. Getting so much better all the time. It's getting better all the time.
Love it.
It's getting better all the time. Getting so much better all the time.
Love it.
So I think we'll go straight to Ben.
Absolutely. Boy, you've pumped me up with that music, brother. I used to drink a lot of Coke. Oh my God.
Matt Rothschild with you this morning. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. Jane and Greg are off today. They'll be back tomorrow. I encourage you to call 855-752-4842 if you want to join the conversation, or text. That's 855-75-CIVIC. I'm here with an old friend of mine, Billy Feitlinger, who used to work for Russ Feingold and Rick Phelps and Kathleen Falk, and did a lot of work organizing retired Americans here in Wisconsin. And about a month before the election, Billy calls me up and he says, Matt, are you busy this morning? I said, no. What do you need? He says, well, we're putting signs together for Kamala Harris. Why don't you come over to this garage and put these signs together? So that's what we did. Didn't turn out the way we wanted. I had convinced myself that she was going to win, and I was kind of crushed that she didn't. But we're moving on. And one person who may be moving on is Ben Wickler. How do you assess Ben Wickler's talents and his chances of becoming national DNC chair?
Well, obviously he's got a good chance, but Ben Wickler is the real deal. We got a gold treasure right here in Wisconsin. I first met Ben in 2018, had a cup of coffee with him. I thought, boy, this guy knows what he's up to and knows what to do. But I have to admit, besides his political, his fundraising, his organizing skills, he brings a personal attribute that I think is really, really, really important to make a really whole person of. And, don't get me wrong. I mean, every human being has flaws. But I got to tell you, Ben Wickler is the real deal.
And what is that personal attribute, or one of the personal attributes that sticks out so much to you?
Well, I think first, he's a totally honest guy, very direct, no BS. And he also has a way of explaining things to the average citizen, or people like myself who have not been a part of the inner circles, in a way that explains things very clear to me in a very factual way. And I also think he brings a patience and a way of a very level-headed guy who has all these great skills, like I said, that I think will be very advantageous at the national level if he is successful, which I think he has a good chance of being very successful. Obviously, from a personal, selfish reason, we have an upcoming election, and I worry about the April election because of all the work that he and his team and all of us around the state over many, many, many years since he's been the chair, where we got to win the Supreme Court race. It's crucial because of people like yourself, Matt, and others like you in whole issue of mapping and things of that sort. Fair mapping is crucial to keep on making the change that we'll need in our state legislature, as well as on the whole issue of reproductive rights, if we don't have a Supreme Court that is open to the law.
Yeah, and that race this April is between Susan Crawford, a liberal judge here in Madison, against the odious Brad Schimmel, who was Attorney General under Walker, who gave a slap on the wrist to Jensen rather than, enforcing the law on Jensen, and is just a very unpleasant person. But yeah, the balance of this Wisconsin Supreme Court hangs on that election in April. And right now we're 4 liberals and 3 conservatives, and the liberal justice is stepping down. And so it's 3-3, depending on who wins that race in April.
So obviously, from a selfish perspective, I worry about our state because you're going to have to transition pretty quickly. After February 1st is when the DNC chair will be decided nationally. And I hope Ben Wickler wins. But there's a selfish reason, a personal way, that I worry about it because we're going to have to transition pretty quickly into how we deal with this important race that you just mentioned, Matt.
Yeah, we would need to have a good successor in place. I hope Ben has someone in mind, or that the Democrats in Wisconsin, and I'm not in those closed-door meetings, have someone in mind who can take over quickly. I know they're just tremendous organizers across the board in one organization after another here in this state who've been doing the good work, deep canvassing in Jefferson County, deep canvassing with Bach in Milwaukee, deep canvassing in rural western Wisconsin. And that's very important. By deep canvassing, I mean not just knocking on doors 3 weeks before the election saying, vote for this Democratic candidate, but getting to know the voters, going back to them. You've done a lot of work at the grassroots level? What's that like?
Well, especially the last 11 years of before I retired full-time work, I worked for as you said, the Alliance for Retired Americans. And I learned a lot going around the state, not only regarding retiree issues, whether it be at the state or federal level, but also how seniors looked at other issues besides that. And so, yeah, I mean, I met a whole range of different people, some of whom agree with me and some of whom did not agree with me. And it was really enlightening for myself because I think one of the things that Ben did when he became the chair was look at blue, red, and purple counties around the state and try to target as much as possible as many of those different places around the state, not just in Dane County, not just in Milwaukee County. And as you can see by the record, he was incredibly successful. So here I am, I'm marketing this guy who I think is the real deal to be the national chair. On the other hand, I worry.
Yeah, I worry too. Of course, I'm a worrier. I worry about everything. That's why I'm up at 3 a.m. Can't get back to sleep. But look, Ben would be a huge asset to the Democratic Party. He's got vision. He's got great media skills, great communication skills, great fundraising skills, and he's got the record to run on it. So I hope he gets it. He deserves it. I'd like to see folks here in Wisconsin getting what they deserve. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. I'm Matt Rothschild. Thanks, Billy Feitlinger, for being my guest this
Thanks,
half hour.
Matt. I really appreciate it. It's great.
And we'll be right back around the corner.
If you feel like that's what you want to do, because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof, because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth, because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want.
I will.
Hey, Matt. Yeah, we have Tom from LA and Troy from Mount Horeb hanging on the line.
And how come I'm not seeing them on my screen?
Do you have a phone screen?
I do, but there's nothing up on it.
Okay, so that means it's signed into the Madison.
So just tell me when we have calls.
So yeah,
Why don't
I'll just tell you.
Yeah, so we'll take callers at the start and just jump in whenever they're callers. But how long is this my podcast? How long is that? Did you
The
say?
clip from your podcast is 10 minutes long.
All right. And this is a 13-minute segment.
Yes.
Okay. But if it's going too long, you can cut into it too if we're running out of time. Just give
Okay,
people
sounds good.
flavor. But yeah, let's take callers. And whenever we get a caller, just jump in.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Jane says, I'm done with Sergio.
Good morning. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. Jane and Greg are off today. They'll be back tomorrow. I'm Matt Rothschild, and I'm here with Calvin on the box, as always. And with you, if you want to join the conversation, the number to call is 855-752-4842. That's 855-75-CIVIC. And if you've been waiting patiently, I thank you for doing so. And Calvin, let's take a couple calls.
Yeah, sure. First up, we have Tom from LA.
Hey, Tom, what's on your mind?
Hey, Matt. Well, you know what? In my opinion, and I'm just going to say this real slowly. In my opinion, we need to stop talking like we're all Democratic consultants and like this is a game. People should not be looked at as data. We are all Americans, and we, the people, are ultimately the government. People think they are being used right now in this game when we on the Democratic side keep talking like we're consultants. Also, I think we need to get back to FDR policies and talk about who is our next FDR and who is going to fulfill his second economic Bill of Rights and tie himself to, or herself to the business that still needs to be completed that FDR talked about.
And
We
who in
need
your
to get
mind is
back
the
to
next FDR?
tax policy.
Tom, sorry to interrupt. I want to know who you think the next FDR is. Is that AOC? Who is that?
No, I think the next, I don't know if that person has even made themselves known yet because I haven't seen a Democratic politician even utter the words FDR. Donald Trump uttered the word FDR probably about 2 weeks ago. I was like, oh my God, someone actually uttered his name. I mean, the right wing's whole plan, Rush Limbaugh's whole plan was to get rid of the New Deal, was to get rid of good government. And that's exactly what Ronald Reagan was all about, was
Yeah,
getting
absolutely.
rid of good government. And then you have Bill Clinton that kind of went right along with it, like government's bad. Government is not bad. Government is we the people. And that's what FDR was able to do, was to actually reach out to the regressives, to the progressives, didn't matter who it was, and actually appeal to them because of policy. But he had the policy written down, and it was simple. Medicare, Social Security for all, unemployment insurance. And for Democrats to not be talking about the person that brought, these policies, and maybe even Johnson with Medicare, if they're not talking about this, shame on them. Because all they're talking about, all you get is email after email asking for another donation, another donation. Well, let's get money out of politics. Why don't we just say, let's get money out, rather than I don't take funding from corporate PACs. Who cares?
Tom, you raise a lot of good points. Tom from LA. The only Democrat I know who talks about FDR is Bernie Sanders. And he's not even a Democrat. He's independent. He's a Democratic socialist. But he was the one who would bring up Bernie Sanders. Bernie was the one who was bringing up FDR a lot. And I do think we need to get back to the four freedoms that FDR talked about. I like the fact that Kamala Harris was grabbing the word freedom again and bringing it back as a prominent place in the Democratic conversation. I wish she had stressed more economic freedoms. And maybe she would have gotten further that way, though she had a big hill to climb, and she campaigned her tail off, so I don't want to pile on here. But, I do think we need to talk about Medicare for all, full employment, full accessible housing for everybody, where rent isn't through the roof like it is right now, paid family leave. If we can't sell those things, we can't sell popcorn in the movie theater. And so then we got a bigger problem than what we think. So thanks for the call, Tom. We've got another caller, right, Kelvin?
Yeah, we also have Troy from Mount Horeb.
Troy, what's on your mind?
Hey, man,
Please.
love the show.
Oh, thank you.
Going back to the pardon. If people don't know the difference between Hunter Biden and Bannon and their J6 people that Trump says he's going to pardon and the rest of them, I can't help them because I would have pardoned. I'm glad he pardoned Hunter. I would have done the same thing, like you said, as a father. And what he said during the campaign, and we can't, if he might not have pardoned them if she had won, if Kamala had won. But, I don't blame him at all for pardoning him. And I don't think him pardoning Hunter and what Trump's going to do equates in the least.
Well, Troy, I agree with you. Troy from Mount Horeb, thanks for the call. I do agree that certainly I would have pardoned my son, any of my sons, if they were in trouble and I had the power to do so. And I think most fathers would have done the same. The problem I had with Biden was saying that he wasn't going to do it and then issuing that statement denouncing the Justice Department's investigation. He didn't need to do that either. And I think those things increase the cynicism and that and the equation that people have that all politicians are the same. So I'm worried about the communications involved in this. I'm worried about going back on his own word. I don't like that. But the actual pardon, I'm okay with. I'm going to switch gears right now if we don't have another call. And I want to address some of the things that I was talking about with Billy Feitinger earlier, which is how do we proceed from here? And I've done a little podcast on that at Civic Media, the Wisconsin Forward podcast. We'll play a little of this and then we'll probably come back either to your calls or more of this after a break. But here's how I made sense of what happened on November 5th and how we proceed from there. So how do we go on? First, we need to take care of ourselves and each other. Turn off your cable TV and give it a rest for a while. You won't find nourishment there, only more anxiety, only more nausea. Spend time with friends, as my wife and I did the night after the election and in subsequent days. And listen to the marvelous essayist Terry Tempest Williams, who wrote, "To feel the pain of now and not look away, to act not with the hope of moving forward, always forward, but to see the wisdom of stepping sideways as we create a different space, a more conscious space in the direction of pause, where we can breathe and gather ourselves so we can gather others around us and create a community of care." I love Terry Tempest Williams. She used to write for me at The Progressive. And yes, we must build that community of care. She's just a wonderful person and a tremendous writer. And we need to also try to get ourselves out into nature, at least for a few minutes a day, if you possibly can. Here's the great Kentucky poet, Wendell Berry, reciting in his own voice, a beautiful baritone, his wise poem, The Peace of Wild Things, which he wrote in the midst of the Vietnam War.
When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
Going into the woods and watching birds always calms me down and charges me up. So thank you, Wendell Berry, for that advice. He just turned 90, by the way, and he's still at it. It's also helpful to look back at other difficult moments, even relatively recent ones, to understand that our gains are not linear. I've gotten my teeth kicked in so many times I hardly have any teeth left, but I keep on shouting. I was a young journalist working for Ralph Nader in Washington, D.C. when Ronald Reagan swept to power, and I was terrified that he was going to blow up the world. Then after I came to Wisconsin, we tried our hardest to beat Scott Walker in the recall election, and then again in his re-election bid, and we got spanked both times. And I was on TV the night that Donald Trump won the first time. And when Paul Ryan said it's a good night for America, I turned to my friend on the set and said, it's more like good night, America. So as Kamala Harris said in her concession speech, I get it. It's tough right now, but we must regroup, regather, rethink, and carry on. One way to start carrying on is to listen to Howard Zinn, the author of A People's History of the United States. This famous quote of his has been on our fridge off and on for 20 years now. I'll start it, and then I'll let Howard himself finish it. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It's based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act and at least the possibility of sending the spinning top of the world in a different direction. Here's Howard Zinn wrapping it up.
And we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. If we live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that's bad around us, that in itself is a marvelous victory.
So that was an excerpt. I love the voices in that. Howard Zinn's voice, Wendell Berry's voice. An excerpt from a podcast I've done for Civic Media called the Wisconsin Forward Podcast that you can find on Civic Media's website, civicmedia.us. This was a real existential moment for all of us, November 5th, and how to proceed after that. But we need to recognize that we've suffered defeats before, and we've regrouped, and people have regrouped all across the world who've lived under authoritarian governments. I mean, imagine being in Chile after Pinochet came to power. They had to overcome real authoritarianism in the streets with a real dictator who threw people out of airplanes and killed thousands upon thousands of people, and whose forces tortured thousands upon thousands more, and yet they still resisted, and they found a way to retrieve their democracy. And so that's what we need to do now. We need to find a way to retrieve our own democracy. And we do have an authoritarian, a fascist in government. We have people like Kash Patel who's saying, I'm going to use the FBI to come after all of you. We can't be scared. We've got to marshal the energy and the courage to resist nonviolently, and we'll get our democracy back. And we'll talk a little bit more how we do that right after this break. I'm Matt Rothschild. You're listening to Matenaer On Air on the Civic Media Radio Network. Good morning, Matt Rothschild here. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. Jane and Greg are off today. They'll be back tomorrow. I'm here with Calvin on the box, and we're encouraging you to call, join the conversation, or join with a text, 855-752-4842. That's 855-75-CIVIC. We're broadcasting all across the Civic Media Radio Network here in Wisconsin. Any callers, Calvin? Do we have any callers right now? Okay. Until we do, for the next few minutes, I want to continue with this discussion of how do we move forward. So this is from the podcast I have at civicmedia.us called the Wisconsin Forward Podcast. So let's play that for a little bit. And you can find that again at civicmedia.us. Zinn's advice is echoed by Václav Havel, the Czech dissident and poet who later became president. Havel called this living within the truth, but not giving into it. The truth right now is we have a fascist president, but we don't have to bow down to him. We can live our lives with dignity and with honor, and we must resist him, and we must try to reach at least some of our fellow citizens who voted for him. Not all of them are in the cult. Not all of them are flying Confederate flags. In fact, most of them aren't. We need to talk with them, listen to them, and gradually try to bring them around. As Timothy Snyder, the author of On Tyranny, wrote after Trump won the first time, power wants your body softening in your chair and your emotions dissipating on the screen. Get outside. Put your body in unfamiliar places with unfamiliar people. Make new friends and march with them. Courage doesn't mean not fearing or not grieving. It does mean resisting right away. And we can resist in a whole variety of ways. We can write letters to the editor. We can call into right-wing radio shows. We can join a good group like the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin or the ACLU of Wisconsin or Common Cause Wisconsin or the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign or Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin or Conservation Voters of Wisconsin or Voces de la Frontera or Black Leaders Organizing for Communities or Fair Wisconsin or the myriad of other progressive nonprofits that are doing so much good in this state. If you're in a union, become active in it. If you're not in a union, try to organize one in your workplace. If you're a member of a church or a synagogue or a mosque, become part of the social justice group within it or form such a group if there isn't one already. But you can't do it alone. Do it with a friend, especially one who's a good cook and has a delightful sense of humor. It's more sustainable that way. Most importantly, after you've recharged your batteries, do something. Get back engaged. Like AOC said after the election,
never, ever, ever think that any choice or any act of yours is too small. It isn't. And regimes and autocracies are taken down by millions of drops of small actions that would otherwise be invisible.
So we need to swamp them with our billion drops of small actions. But we'll also need to swamp them with large actions. We must be prepared to shelter those who are most at risk, and that means the undocumented, the trans, and any political foes that Donald Trump goes after. And we must be prepared to march in the streets to protest any of the fascist moves that Trump makes. And we must be prepared to engage in strikes. The broader, the better. We need to build a vast progressive mass movement to counter the fascist mass movement and blunt Trump. We'll also need to return to the electoral arena. Here in Wisconsin, we made significant gains in the state legislature thanks to the fairer maps that we got after a long struggle. There will be more seats to win in 2 years and the governorship to hold on to. More imminently, there's another big Wisconsin Supreme Court race in April that will determine the balance there as Susan Crawford, the Liberal candidate, faces off against the odious Brad Schimmel. I know I don't have an ounce of energy to even contemplate another electoral campaign right now, but I hope to gather some energy after the holidays. Rest, recoup, recharge, re-engage. That's my to-do list. Our Eastern European friends who lived under authoritarianism for decades offered this advice back in 2016. Above all, be strong, fight, endure, and remember, you're on the good side of history. Every authoritarian, totalitarian, and fascist regime in history eventually failed, thanks to the people. It was true in Europe. It was true in Chile and Brazil and Argentina and Paraguay. and it'll be true right here in the United States. Back in college, I fell in love with the poet W.H. Auden. One of his most powerful poems was entitled September 1st, 1939, the very day the Nazis invaded Poland. Here's his haunting last stanza. Defenseless under the night, our world in stupor lies, yet dotted everywhere, ironic points of light flash out wherever the just exchange their messages. May I, composed like them, of eros and of dust, beleaguered by the same negation and despair, show an affirming flame. So that was W.H. Auden reading his great poem. That was me reading his great poem, which is the poem that he wrote after Hitler invaded Poland. And it talked about how we go on, which is the existential dilemma we face right now. And you were listening there to a podcast that I did about how we go on, being the light. You can find it at civicmedia.us, the Wisconsin Forward podcast. And I think we need to encourage everyone to, regroup and regather and get our energies together. I mentioned a lot of organizations there, like League of Women Voters, et cetera. Tomorrow's Giving Tuesday. It's a good time to donate to these nonprofit organizations in Wisconsin that are doing the good work for democracy. ACLU Wisconsin. I used to work at Wisconsin Democracy Campaign and the Progressive. Those are good nonprofits too. And I know Civic Media is doing a lot to support Giving Tuesday. So it's really important short term financially to support these groups. More importantly, still join one of the groups. Get involved with a friend in an organization, in a union, at a church, at a synagogue, at a mosque, wherever you engage with other people. Don't do it alone. It's too lonely a battle to do alone, but do it with friends, and we can get through this period. I'm Matt Rothschild. I'm subbing in here for Jane on Matenaer On Air, and I'll be right back with Sean Fediplace, and we'll talk to him about what's going on. I hope you'll join me and join that conversation, and we'll be right back.
Bring a flower, time is wasting. I say that this creation, we all need a celebration. It's hard to make a stand, and it's hard to make a stand. Oh, it's hard to make a stand. Yeah, it's hard to make a stand.
Yeah, I see you on Facebook.
Yeah, I was pretty focused on our federal work for a long time, and now I get to focus on Wisconsin again.
Yeah.
Actually, Sean, I'm gonna get you on this one. Let's pull that chair over here. Or do you want to sit or do you want to stand?
This
I
is
don't-
this
whatever-
mic is live, so
whatever
you'll
works
have
best.
I can put it
to fix
over
the
there.
line. Yeah,
That's fine.
I know you know how things work.
I'll get you on this one just because the framing on the camera is better. So, however you want to position yourself there.
Who is this Chad BBC?
Just somebody on Facebook or somebody on YouTube. Just know that if you comment there, though, it goes out to the social.
And so, how do I not do that?
When you want to send just to Kelvin, you got to click on this one for people first, and then comment.
Oh, I never knew that.
No worries.
You should have seen me on Friday when I was the only one here. Jess had me go in there and had to fix something.
Oh no.
It worked, but it
Oh jeez, I'm sorry.
was way above my head, though. Oh, we have Matt from Middleton. Okay.
And you got that pair of headphones for you over there.
Make sure my phone notifications are off. These ones? How much time do we have?
So we have from 11:34 to 11:49.
Yeah.
And if you want to stay to the top of the hour, that's fine too.
Yeah, whatever works for you.
3 minutes until we're back.
Yeah.
Okay. It's such a nice studio.
Oh, it's great. It's great here. After the break, though, you'll probably want to go because I've got to take a call or two and then do a segment that we end on. But you can stay here if you'd like. It's up to you.
Yeah,
But we won't be able to talk much.
Yeah, I have a call at noon
Yeah, you
for
should
work,
probably.
and so is it okay if I just find someplace?
Yeah,
back
just
there?
ask them. Fine.
Yeah. And you said you want to talk about shop local and about Trump.
Yeah.
I'm happy to follow your lead. I would say one thing. Nationally, we're going to be working a lot on the Tax Cut and Jobs Act stuff.
Okay.
That's going to be coming up this year. And
Is there any hope, though, that's going to come through?
so, I mean, it's definitely going to get reauthorized. The question is, what does it look like? And we want it to be more favorable to smaller operators and local businesses instead of larger businesses. So we just launched a coalition in support of that.
Okay.
And
Are you doing anything about just urging people shopping locally this
Yeah.
season?
I could do that.
But then I'll ask about your political objectives in 2025.
Yeah, I can highlight some local businesses
And
that are members.
what did you guys do on Trump?
Um,
Do you have a C4 that did stuff? Or
we it was all state legislature. We actually launched a PAC and we ran in 6 races and we won 5 of them
in the state?
in the
Here
state. Yeah,
Wisconsin.
and I have to say, I learned a lot about our campaign finance laws during that period. Don't love them.
Yeah, should be all set.
Okay. So we're on at 10:34.
Okay. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the legislature changes the dynamics a bit. I do think it's going to change a bit, not
Okay.
entirely, but
We
you
can,
know,
we can talk about that too.
yeah. Thanks for having me on.
And it's Feta Place, Sean Feta.
Yes, like the cheese.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey, good morning. It's Matt Rothschild. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. Jane is off today, as is Greg. They'll be back tomorrow. I'm here with Calvin on the box. And with you, if you want to join the conversation, the number to call is 855-752-4842. That's 855-75-CIVIC. Joining me in the studio in Madison right now is Sean Feta Place. Sean is the National Campaigns Director of the Main Street Alliance. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, tell our listeners what the Main Street Alliance is.
Yeah, the Main Street Alliance is a organization made up of small business owners all throughout the country. Here in Wisconsin, we have about 2,000 member businesses that we work with, and we're really working to build power in local communities on issues that they care about. And so we've been in the state for about 4.5 years and just excited to do this work.
Now, you used to be the Wisconsin director, and now I see you're National Campaigns Director. Does that mean you got a promotion?
I mean, I love our state, and so I still do a lot of stuff here, but you know, it's been really interesting to see what we've been able to learn from Wisconsin and the work here, and really working to do more work in states like Virginia, North Carolina, New Jersey, and just really build out this network all across the country.
So what is it that you learned from doing your work here in Wisconsin?
So I would say, first off, people listen to small businesses and their voices. Furthermore, it's important to get involved not only in the work of legislation, but we also have members that ran for office. We also recently launched a PAC, and we got involved in the political process more directly as well.
I'm going to want to ask about that in a second, but I see that we've got a caller, Don from Green Bay. Why don't we take that call? Don, are you on the line?
Yeah, it's Dan from Green Bay. Here we go.
Dan, I'm sorry. I should have my glasses on.
That's fine. You can call me anything you want. So anyway, I'm listening to what you're saying, okay? And I'm a Republican, okay? And I'm like, why are you afraid of Trump? I mean, Trump's policies, actually, based on the guests you currently have, benefited small and medium-sized businesses tremendously, and especially in terms of deregulation. And so I'm just curious as to why all the fear-mongering. I mean, it strikes me as kind of like, ill-informed. I mean, to be honest with you.
All right, Dan, I appreciate the call. That's Dan from Green Bay. I'll just give you my own opinion, and then I'll let our guest, Sean Fetterplace, answer for himself. I'm scared of Trump because he has said he's going to be a dictator on day one, and he wants to get rid of parts of the U.S. Constitution. And he's putting people in place like Kash Patel, who says we're going to come after the people, including people in the media. I mean, this is not how a democracy is supposed to work. But I'll turn it over to Sean on the question of small businesses. How would you react to Dan from Green Bay?
Yeah, well, thanks, Dan. And I would say that if you look at the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was passed in 2017, it was designed in a way where the overwhelming benefit went to the very wealthy and larger businesses as opposed to smaller businesses. And so, it might sound like it's the right, Trump has talked a lot about supporting small business, but the reality doesn't always match the rhetoric. And so we're going to hold him accountable and make sure that is the case over the next 4 years.
Thanks again, Dan. We've got Matt from Middleton. And Matt, I'm sorry I made you wait before, but thanks for calling back. What's on your mind?
Hey, guys. I follow economists and what they say quite a bit. And what I heard years ago was that the 90s was the best the economy will ever be as far as growth, as far as American businesses. And a lot of this stock market stuff is just rich people buying up assets and buying up stocks, and it's not a good indication of the economy. So my question is, how do you go forward? How do we have a system that has less and less growth, and we can then do more community-based capitalism? And because, the world order is shifting, and a lot of countries aren't going to deal with us anymore, the BRICS nations, so on and so forth. So that should be the discussion, is how do we go forward with more local capitalism and decentralize? Because I think that's the way forward. Thanks, guys.
Well, thanks for the call, Matt from Middleton, raising an important question about how we go forward. I mean, I don't think Trump's tariffs are going to help people at all here in Wisconsin or around the country, or the consumer every day trying to make ends meet. But I want to ask Sean how he would answer that question.
Yeah, I would say one of the best things that President Biden did was to nominate Lena Khan as FTC chair. There's been a lot of work done to actually enforce our antitrust laws over the course of the last 4 years. And she's gotten support both from Republicans and Democrats on that. If you actually enforce antitrust law, that's going to mean fewer monopolies, less consolidation, and more local communities. And so my hope is that we'll be able to keep up that fight both federally and the state level in the weeks to come.
But that's not likely to be Trump's policy. I don't believe Donald Trump's going to be a trust buster, not with all the billionaires in his cabinet there. I mean, it's a government of, by, and for the billionaires, it looks like, with Trump coming on. What can we do, or what can the consumer do to help build a more democratic, small d, more functional economy locally? I think that's one of the things Matt from Middleton was talking about. And I just wanted to ask you, Sean Fetterplace, with the Main Street Alliance, how do we encourage people to shop locally as opposed to the big chains or Amazon, for instance?
Well, I would say, the Madison area, but also all across the state, we're a small business state, and the best thing you could do is spend your dollars in those local small businesses. In this area, you've got, Rude Brew Kombucha, you've got local music venues, you've got Pizza stops. You've got a lot of those local makers markets. I definitely would encourage folks to go to those local farmers markets, to those local craft fairs, to be able to really keep their dollars local. And so over the course of the next several weeks, definitely encourage you to both shop local. Gift cards are great because it's a way to give those businesses some capital to be able to operate as well. And so shop local, and also make sure you're actually looking up the ownership of these businesses, because sometimes they look local and they're not.
Yeah, there's nothing better for the local economy than shopping local. Keep the dollars here, not fleeing out of your local community or out of state, or God forbid, even out of the country. So we were talking a little bit earlier, Sean, you brought up this question of what you've learned about Wisconsin politics at the Main Street Alliance. And you said you engaged in some of the electioneering that happened locally here in Wisconsin, not talking about Trump right now. What was your success doing that?
So I would say, first off, the new maps made a huge difference because it allowed folks to be able to run and actually have a chance to win. We really haven't been a democracy for 12 years in our state because of the rigged maps.
And can we just salute everyone who worked on that campaign to get
Exactly.
us fair maps? I mean, this was a campaign, sometimes campaigns seem unwinnable, and the fair maps campaign to the cynics seemed unwinnable. You're never going to get that. And lo and behold, we got it, and it's made a difference. So I just want to congratulate everyone who worked on that.
Yeah, it made a huge difference. And so we got involved in 6 races all across the state, in literally every corner of the state, both the state Senate and state assembly. We had numerous MSA members, including Kristen Alfheim as an example, up in Appleton, who ran. And we worked to make sure that small business voices were front and center in the election. So we ran ads, we held roundtables where the candidates were invited to come and talk with local small business owners about their priorities. And, we have now a legislature that's much more close to 50-50 and much more reflective of the people of our state. And so we're hopeful that in the next legislative session, we're hopefully going to be able to get some stuff done.
What's the stuff that you'd like to see get done here in Wisconsin?
Medicaid expansion being number one. We are one of 10 states left that has not taken it. It is not only a moral obscenity that we haven't taken it, but also it's bad for business. So childcare count. Yeah,
how is it bad for business?
A lot of employers just simply can't afford to provide health care. They're maybe too small. If you are somebody in a job where you're making good money, you might not be able to leave that job because you need the benefits. And so a lot of entrepreneurship doesn't get started because of that. So it really would help to both make sure people are getting the healthcare they need, but also help to spur entrepreneurship. And it would save our state money. We've spent an extra $2.4 billion over the last 10 years than we would have spent if we had actually taken the expansion already.
Ooh, that's a sin.
Yeah.
What are some of the other issues? You started talking about childcare when I rudely interrupted you.
No, childcare counts was not funded in the last budget, and I'm convinced several lawmakers lost their jobs partially due to that issue. That is something that needs to be funded, and we believe in funding at $2 billion over the biennium. That'll help to make sure that parents can afford care, but that the providers are also earning enough to stay in the industry and to attract people to the industry.
So what is that exactly? That's a subsidy to child care providers?
Yes, it's directly to providers to be able to keep costs down. And right now, if we do not fund that program in this next budget, you're looking at potentially over 1,000 child care centers across our state closing permanently. And those are not going to come back if they go. That could cause huge workforce issues. And frankly, last budget, we were only asking for $300 million at that point. The problem's gotten worse. And so this needs to be addressed.
And it's so hard for parents to pay for childcare. And if there are fewer places, the costs are just going to keep going up. And that's a crisis people don't talk about. You're also working, I think, on paid family leave stuff.
That's right. We were very involved in the win in Minnesota. I think it was just last year. And, we've worked hard on that issue for a number of years. That is something that needs to happen in our state if we're going to be competitive across the Midwest. There's huge momentum behind it as well right now. New Mexico is about to pass paid leave. Maryland passed it. Pennsylvania is on the cusp. Michigan's on the cusp. A lot of the action on this is at the state level. And so we look forward to working to try to get this done. And we're hopeful it's going to be in the governor's budget when he releases it in
Well,
the next month or so.
It's one thing to be in the governor's budget. It's another thing to get it across Robin Voss's desk and Devin Lemieux's desk. What are the possibilities there?
I think we need to ratchet up the pressure. I think we need to, there's several state reps in the Fox Valley, in Milwaukee, in Southwest Wisconsin, who really need to hear from their constituents about this issue. And because ultimately, if we can get enough of them to be supportive, then it can force the issue with Voss and Lemieux. I think it's going to be very challenging. Speaker Voss actually tweeted at me the other day about on healthcare.
What did he say?
He said that Medicaid expansion is welfare, and that people are okay because they can go in the marketplace. Well, if you're making $18,000 or $20,000 a year, you can't afford a $5,000 deductible. And so if we're going to have this debate, it needs to be an honest debate. And so that's something we're going to do, is we're going to bring sunlight to these issues.
Did you ask him whether Foxconn's welfare?
I see. The thing, I wanted to stay focused on the issue. He got
I'm kidding you.
He got a little nasty. I was just like, here's a study. The Wisconsin Policy Forum did a study on Medicaid that was fairly recent that showed that it is long overdue to get this done, and we shouldn't let partisan politics get in the way of good policy.
I'm speaking with Sean Fettiplace. He's the National Campaigns Director of the Main Street Alliance. He also has been working here in Wisconsin for how many years now?
About 4.5.
There you go. And I just need to get your take on Trump and why you think he won and what we need to do now.
There's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking, and there's been a bit of time now that's passed, and people have been able to absorb it. I mean, I think that there's a lot of reasons. I think first off, there was the political process where the candidates changed very late in the game. I think the other piece of this is that, 4 years is a long time in politics. People forget. And I think for a lot of folks, they remember the cheap eggs. They remember, the cheaper gas. And it's important to remember that that's because we are in a pandemic. And so we're going to work to hold them accountable over the next few years.
Yeah, we all have to do that work. Thanks so much for being my guest today. Sean Fettiplace, National Campaigns Director of Main Street Alliance. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. We'll be right back with This Shouldn't Be a Thing, Jane's funny way that she ends her show every day. Thanks for listening, and please hang on.
In the middle of our street, our house. In the middle of our street, our house. In the middle of our street, our house. In the middle of our house was our castle and our king. Our house. In the middle of our street, our house. That was where
We need to change the campaign finance laws. I mean,
That's all I've worked at.
I know, that's why I wanted to.
8.5 years, yeah.
I just, having been in it, I just realized how ridiculous it was. And was the 2014 law that passed?
2015.
2015, yeah. It's not okay.
One more segment, Aaron.
Yep.
Is this your coat?
Oh, yeah, it is. Thank you.
Happy birthday, by the way, Aaron.
All right, you take care.
Yeah, call for coffee.
Will do.
Hey, Matt, can you say something real quick so I can double check which
Yeah.
mic that is?
Yeah, I am. We're going to do this. Shouldn't be a thing in a minute. But
Just so I can turn off the other one.
Yeah.
So we're good.
This one was hot too.
Doesn't look like it is now.
Okay, good. I think Luke turned that off. Hey, Matt Rothschild with you just for a few more minutes here on Matenaer On Air. Jane is gone today, as is Greg, but Calvin is here on the box. And before I forget, Calvin, I want to thank you for helping me out here. It's been a fun morning. I've enjoyed doing the show. I want to thank Jane and Greg for letting me get behind the mic. And I want to thank our guests, most recently Sean Fediplace of Main Street Alliance, Billy Feitlinger, longtime political activist here in Dane County who used to work for Russ Feingold. I want to thank the callers and the texters. And I want to remind people that coming up after the top of the hour is the talented Todd Alba on the Todd Alba Show. But right now, I mean, one of the funnest things when I'm driving around listening to Civic Media and listening to Matenaer On Air is her delicious little daily item called This Shouldn't Be a Thing. So, Calvin, if you could play the intro to that, I will talk about the item that I found.
This shouldn't be a thing.
So this is from an article that the AP did a couple of weeks ago. And this shouldn't be a thing, breaking into a car with a bear outfit on. So here we go. California has seen its share of bears breaking into cars, but bears caught on camera entering luxury cars tipped off insurers that something wasn't quite right. In what it has dubbed Operation Bear Claw, the California Insurance Department said 4 LA residents were arrested accused of defrauding 3 insurance companies out of nearly $142,000 by claiming a bear had caused damage to their vehicles. The group is accused of providing video footage from the San Bernardino Mountains in January of a bear moving inside a Rolls Royce and 2 Mercedes to the insurance companies as part of their damage claims. Photos provided by the insurance department show what appeared to be scratches on the seats and doors. The company viewing video of the Rolls Royce suspected it wasn't a bear inside, but someone in a bear costume. Detectives found 2 additional claims with 2 different insurance companies for the 4 people with the same date of loss and at the same location. Similar video was provided of the so-called bear inside the Mercedes vehicles. The department had a biologist from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife review the 3 videos, and he concluded it was clearly a human in a bear suit. So don't go impersonating a bear if you are going to go making a little robbery. So this shouldn't be a thing. Calvin, can you take us out on it?
This shouldn't be a thing.
And it reminds me, I don't know, Calvin, are you a believer in Bigfoot?
You know, maybe 10 years ago, but no, not anymore.
You know, that's what this story reminded me. Every time I'm on Facebook and I see one of those videos or so-called videos of so-called Bigfoot roaming around in the woods, a real glance, only a fleeting glance of Bigfoot, I have to laugh. And this story reminded me, it sounded like one of those Bigfoot videos. I believe that those Bigfoot videos are people in bear costumes, just like these people who were trying to defraud their insurance companies of what, $140,000. They got caught as they deserve to be. So love that this shouldn't be a thing. I love Jane's show. I love the way Jane and Greg interact on Matenaer On Air and the way you interact, Calvin, with Jane and Greg. It's a terrific program here on Civic Media. It's been my pleasure to be with you on Civic Media this morning on the Jane Matenaer On Air show. I do want to encourage people to give to Giving Tuesday tomorrow. There are all these great organizations, nonprofit organizations in Wisconsin who rely on your donations in these last few weeks of the year. Those tax-deductible donations sometimes make up 50% of a nonprofit's annual budget. 1 month makes up 50%. It's crazy, but that's how these organizations survive. So find an organization in Wisconsin that you want to support and give at any level. It doesn't matter. Just give them a small donation if that's all you can afford. It all adds up for these organizations on Giving Tuesday. I know Civic Media itself is supporting the Giving Tuesday effort, and I just want to reiterate how important it is. And I also want to stress the need to regather our strength here during the holidays. I think it's important, at least for me, psychologically, not to watch a lot of news. I'd rather listen to Civic Media. I'd rather go online to find my news than to be bombarded by the images of Trump and the images of his horrible appointments that he's making. I'd rather take it quickly online and listen to it on Civic Media than suffer through watching him and watching his nominees and just getting my blood pressure to go up. We don't need our blood pressure to go up right now. We've got to regroup, gather our strength for the coming year, gather our strength here in Wisconsin for the big Wisconsin Supreme Court race that's coming up in April, and to keep up the fight. I know a lot of people were incredibly discouraged, as I was, on the evening of November 5th, but, you know, we got to live to fight another day, and we can't give up. We don't have the luxury of giving up. Bernie Sanders just posted recently a quick little line I wanted to share with you. He was talking about we got to take on Trump and the oligarchs. The best way to do that, he said, is to educate and organize. Educate and organize. He added, we've got to expand our social media outreach. We've got to find grassroots leaders who are prepared to take on the powerful special interests. We got to find people to run for office. Bernie is right on all of that. So it's been my pleasure being with you and Calvin on Matenaer On Air. Stay tuned for the Todd Albaugh Show, which I always enjoy listening to on the Civic Media Radio Network.